She leaned in so close I could smell the artificial lavender in her hair and said through her teeth, "If you don't transfer everything to us, I swear I won't leave you alone. Ever." Her breath was warm, sharp with control. I just nodded. But my phone, tucked inside my coat pocket, was already recording. The reading of Harold's will had taken place in a beige conference room that smelled faintly of paper and lemon cleaner. I'd picked a quiet seat near the window, away from the large, polished table where Savannah and her husband were already seated. Her boys didn't come. Not surprising. They rarely did. "Mrs. Crawford?" The lawyer, Mr. Tilson, had looked at me gently, waiting for a signal to begin. I nodded. He was younger than Harold's old partner, but I trusted him. He spoke in a low, respectful tone, his words methodical and careful, as if afraid they might shatter something. I suppose they did. Savannah's face barely moved through the first part, the burial trust, the charities, the small allocations. But when Mr. Tilson mentioned the house, the one Harold and I had lived in for nearly 50 years, and the shares in the Crawford Medical Group still left in my name, her posture shifted, just slightly, like a vulture leaning in. "The primary residence at 914 Maple Drive is to remain under the ownership of Mrs. Crawford," Tilson read. "All company shares are currently held by Mrs. Crawford and were not legally transferred to Mr. Crawford's estate. Thus, no corporate shares are included in this will." That's when she asked for a minute. She smiled, told Tilson it was a lot to take in, said she needed some air. Then she pulled my arm, not too hard, just enough to remind me I'd never been strong like her, and led me into the hallway. And there, by the elevator, where the carpet was worn down to the thread, she said it. "You'll transfer the house and the shares and the accounts, everything. We're your only family. You owe us. And if you don't, I'll make sure you never have another peaceful night." I didn't say a word. I didn't cry either. I just stood there, coat buttoned, purse under my arm, like a school teacher waiting out a tantrum. But in my coat pocket, beneath a lace-edged handkerchief and my reading glasses, was my phone. I'd tapped record before we'd left the room. The rest of the will passed in silence. Savannah didn't speak. Her husband checked his watch several times. When it ended, Mr. Tilson asked if I needed help back to the car. I told him no, thank you. But as I reached for my coat, he touched my arm gently and said, "If you need anything, legal or otherwise, please don't hesitate." I don't think he said it to be kind. I think he saw something. Maybe it was the way Savannah looked at me, or maybe it was the way I didn't look back. Outside, the November wind curled around my ankles. I clutched my coat tighter, walked slowly to the car, and sat for a few minutes before turning the key. Her voice still echoed in my ears. Not the words, but the tone. That entitlement. That disgust. Like I was just a wall between her and her inheritance. The drive home took 15 minutes. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't think. Just counted the red lights and kept my eyes on the road. At home, I hung my coat neatly, set my bag on the table, and made tea. Chamomile. I added a slice of lemon, even though it made my tongue itch a little. Then I sat down in Harold's chair and played the recording. "If you don't transfer everything to us, I swear I won't leave you alone." I listened to it twice, then a third time. Then I opened the old ledger drawer in the desk, the one with Harold's papers, and pulled out my legal file. It still had his handwritten notes in the margins, dates, numbers, names. I placed it beside my tea. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me. Maybe because something inside me had shifted, or maybe because this had been coming for years. I just hadn't wanted to see it. By the time the sun dipped behind the hedge out back, I'd made 3 decisions. First, I would not give her the house, not the shares, not the accounts, not an inch. Second, I would call Tilson first thing in the morning. And third, I would keep that recording. Because for the first time in my life, I had something that made them afraid of me. The house was quiet that evening, in the way only old houses can be. Settled, breathing softly through the vents, remembering things no one else does. I moved slowly, not from hesitation, but from habit. I washed the teacup, folded the shawl I'd left on the couch, turned off the porch light. Then I sat at the kitchen table with Harold's file open in front of me and pressed play on the recording again. If you don't transfer everything to us, I swear I won't leave you alone. There it was, plain and crisp. No background noise, no doubt about the speaker. Savannah's voice, sharp as ever, curling around the words like a blade. I let it play through to the end. There was a pause after her threat, a silence where I must have just looked at her, and then a small scoff. The kind of laugh you make when you think you've already won. That, more than anything, made my chest tighten. That little sound. She wasn't even angry. She was confident. I saved the file under a new name, Crawford Witness 01. Then I emailed it to myself, to a new account I'd made an hour earlier, just in case. I wrote the password down on a slip of paper and tucked it inside a photo frame on the mantel, behind the one of me and Harold on our 30th anniversary, standing beside the old maple in the backyard. I wore a navy dress then, too. In the morning, I made oatmeal, even though I wasn't hungry. Then I dressed carefully, dark slacks, soft blouse, my wool coat, the one with the brooch Harold bought me at the county fair the year he made partner. I caught the 10:20 bus downtown. I hadn't driven in years. Harold always said I had a heavy foot and a soft heart, not a good combination on the road. Tilson's office was quieter in the morning, fewer voices in the hallway, the scent of fresh coffee replacing yesterday's lemon cleaner. His assistant looked up, surprised. "Mrs. Crawford," she smiled politely. "Did you have an appointment?" "No, but I think Mr. Tilson will want to see me." I placed my hand gently on my purse, where my phone sat. She must have heard something in my voice. Within 5 minutes, I was seated across from Tilson again, this time in his smaller office with the window that overlooked the courthouse steps. He wore a gray sweater under his suit jacket and looked even younger in daylight. When I told him I'd recorded the hallway conversation, he sat up straighter. "You did?" I nodded. Before we left the room, I had a feeling. He didn't ask why. He just said, "May I listen?" And I handed him the phone. He plugged in a set of office headphones and leaned forward, fingers steepled, silent for the duration. When the file ended, he took off the headphones and exhaled. "She really said that." "She did. This changes things." I nodded again. Tilson straightened the file folder in front of him. "Mrs. Crawford, if you're open to it, I'd like to bring in one of our litigation partners. Not because we're going to court just yet, but because I think we should prepare. That recording is evidence of coercion, possibly elder abuse, depending on how far she's gone in the past." "She's gone far enough," I said softly. He didn't press. He didn't ask for stories. That's what I liked about him. He waited. "What I want," I said, "is to make sure she can't touch anything. Not the house, not the shares, not the bank. I want to put it all out of her reach, and I want it legal. Solid." "We can do that," he said, no hesitation. "I also want to revise my will." Immediately. We'll begin today. It took 2 hours to go over the assets. Tilson asked for account numbers, property deeds, old partnership agreements. Harold had always kept tidy records. Everything was in a folder labeled "If I Go First," which I'd never opened until the night after his funeral. Savannah didn't even ask about it. She assumed it was hers. Everything was. Before I left the office, Tilson handed me a sheet of paper with instructions: what to gather, what to sign, what to consider. At the bottom, he added, in blue ink, "Don't worry, you're not alone in this." The bus ride home was slow, the kind of ride that makes you think too much. But my thoughts weren't muddy. They were clean, sharp, focused. I wasn't grieving. I wasn't angry. I was alert. At home, I sat by the window and watched the street for a while. A dog barked somewhere down the block. The mail came. I didn't get up to get it. Then my phone rang. Savannah. I let it buzz 5 times before answering. My voice was calm. "Hello?" "Mother." Her tone was flat, clipped, like she was already halfway through a meeting. "I need to speak with you about what you plan to do regarding the house. I've spoken with Jeremy, and we both think it would be best if you simply transferred the title now to avoid confusion. You don't need that kind of burden at your age." There it was again. Control, packaged in concern. "Are you home?" she asked. "No." Pause. "Well, when you get back, we should talk. It doesn't have to be hard. We're just trying to make things easier on everyone." I didn't answer. "Mother," she said again, "I heard you. And? I'll be in touch through my attorney." Another pause. Then the voice shifted, just slightly. "You talked to Tilson?" "I did." More silence. "You don't need to go that route. It makes things messy. Complicated." "No, Savannah," I said quietly. "You make things complicated." Then I ended the call. I didn't expect her to call again that evening, but she did. Twice. I didn't answer either time. The third time, I turned the phone off completely. Some silences are worth holding on to. The next morning, I woke before dawn, as I always do. The bedroom was dim and cool. I sat up slowly, pulled the quilt tighter around my shoulders, and stared out the window at the empty street. A soft fog had rolled in overnight, settling over the hedges like a second skin. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with my list from Tilson. First item: secure all accounts. I called the bank the moment their line opened. "Mrs. Crawford?" said the voice on the other end. Marta, the personal banker Harold and I had known for years. "How can I help?" "I need to revoke all shared authorizations. Immediately." "You mean Savannah's?" "I mean everyone's." A pause. "All right. I'll need you to come in and sign the forms in person. But we can freeze external access starting today." "Do it," I said. "And I want statements printed monthly, delivered to me directly. No digital copies, no permissions." "I understand. And I'd like to set up a new account for future allocations. Under my name only." There was no emotion in my voice, no bitterness, just business. Something Harold had taught me long ago. When emotion clouds the room, open a window and deal in facts. The bank branch was only 6 blocks away. I walked. The air was sharp with morning chill, but I didn't mind. It reminded me I was still here. Marta was waiting when I arrived. She had the papers ready and a cup of tea already steeping on the desk. "You sure about this, Mrs. Crawford?" "I am." She glanced at the forms. "Do you want to leave anything for Savannah? Emergency access? Power of attorney?" I smiled faintly. "You know what she said to me at Harold's will?" Marta looked unsure. I leaned forward and told her, word for word. Her eyes widened slightly. She didn't say anything else, just handed me a pen. By 11, it was done. Every account isolated, every access removed. Savannah's name erased from the financial side of my life as cleanly as ink can be lifted off paper. Back home, I opened the closet in the guest room, the one I never used. Inside was a lockbox Harold had installed years ago. It still held our old documents, backup keys, some jewelry, and a leather-bound book with the family trust. I hadn't touched it since his passing. The pages smelled faintly of cedar. His handwriting was all over the margins, notes about timelines, backup plans, names of people we'd trusted. His care showed in every line. He'd built this life with me, not for me, and certainly not for it to be hijacked after he was gone. I sat down with the book and began taking notes. At 3:12 p.m., the doorbell rang. I knew it was her before I even stood up. Savannah never rang more than once. She always assumed people would come to her. I opened the door and looked into her face. Too smooth, too composed, her hair too perfect for a woman who claimed to be concerned about her mother. She didn't wait for an invitation. "We need to talk," she said, stepping inside. "I'm tired of all this lawyer nonsense. This is family, not court." I said nothing. Just let her walk into the living room. She didn't sit. Instead, she turned to face me, arms crossed. "I don't know what Tilson told you or what ridiculous idea you've got in your head, but this is all unnecessary. We're your only family. You're not thinking clearly. You're grieving, emotional, and frankly, being manipulated." "I'm not the one doing the manipulating." She rolled her eyes. "Please, recording me. That's paranoid. That's not something a healthy person does. It's not healthy to threaten your mother over real estate." She looked away for a moment. "I didn't threaten you. I said things in a moment of stress. It wasn't meant to—" "I have the recording." She went silent. "I've sent it to my attorney, and I've made 3 copies, one of which is now in the hands of a legal trustee. You cannot erase what you said, Savannah." Her voice dropped. "So what's your plan? Punish your own daughter? Humiliate me in court?" "No. I'm protecting myself. Something I should have done a long time ago." There it was. The shift in her eyes. She realized I wasn't bluffing. "You're really doing this?" "I already have." Her face stiffened. Her voice came quieter now, with that faux sweetness she'd mastered in her teenage years. "What do you think you'll achieve, Mother? You want to end your life in loneliness and lawyers? You want to go to court with your own child and be remembered as the bitter old woman who destroyed her own family over a misunderstanding?" I didn't flinch. "No," I said. "I want to end my life knowing I stood up for myself. Once. Just once." She stared at me for a long moment, then turned sharply, walked to the door and paused. "You'll regret this." "Perhaps," I said. "But at least it will be my regret, not yours." Then I closed the door behind her. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I returned to the guest room, sat back down, and continued reviewing the trust documents. At 4:47, my phone buzzed. A message from Tilson. "We've begun the asset restructuring. Savannah's counsel has already contacted us. I'll keep you informed. You're doing the right thing." For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. The next morning, the sky was steel gray, the kind of morning that brings wind without warning. I watched the branches sway from the front window and wondered what Harold would have said if he'd seen yesterday's scene unfold. He'd been quiet with anger. Not the kind that exploded, the kind that settled deep like sediment, and stayed there. She forgets who she came from, he would have said, and who paid for her first car. I smiled at the thought, a sad smile. Harold had always called Savannah a windstorm in a silk scarf. Even when she was small, she had a way of turning needs into demands and expectations into obligations. But I had let it grow, allowed it, enabled it, no more. I called Tilson just after breakfast. She came to the house, I told him. I expected she might. She asked if I wanted to be remembered as the bitter old woman who destroyed her family. He was quiet a moment. And what did you say? I said I wanted to be remembered as someone who stood up for herself. Once. That's a good answer, he said. And it's already part of your record. He told me his team had responded to Savannah's lawyer, a woman named Daniela Carr, who'd sent an email late last night accusing me of financial confusion and family estrangement due to declining capacity. Savannah's trying to establish the groundwork for contesting your competence, he said. They'll likely try to delay, then argue undue influence. They're trying to paint me as senile. Yes. I nodded, though my hands clenched around the phone. Let them try. Tilson said they would be gathering supporting documents, financial records, personal statements, and, if needed, a full psychological evaluation. I agreed to everything. I'm not afraid of being evaluated, I told him. I'm afraid of staying invisible. That afternoon, I took a walk to clear my head. The wind had picked up, rustling the leaves and pulling at my sleeves. I passed the library, the bakery, the corner bench where Harold and I used to sit in the summer with ice cream cones. All of it looked the same, and all of it felt different now. When I got home, a car I didn't recognize was parked across the street. Black, sleek, too new for the neighborhood. My stomach turned a little, but I didn't let myself pause. I walked up the porch steps and unlocked the door. Inside, I boiled water for tea and waited. 15 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a young woman, maybe 35, in a sharp navy suit. She held a tablet in one hand and a sleek black leather folder in the other. Mrs. Crawford? Yes. I'm Daniela Carr. I represent Savannah and Jeremy Clay. May I come in? No, I said, but you can speak from the porch. She smiled, tight. Very well. I wanted to extend an offer to resolve this matter privately before formal filings begin. We believe the current course of action is unnecessarily escalated and detrimental to the family's reputation. To Savannah's reputation, I said. Your daughter has expressed concern about your well-being. She threatened me in a hallway after her father's funeral. That's not what she recalls. I have a recording. Ms. Carr hesitated for the first time. I said nothing more, just looked at her. She shifted on her heels. We'd like to propose a full property transfer in exchange for a lifetime care agreement, she said. You retain residency rights, all your needs covered. In return, the deed transfers immediately. The trust is dissolved. So I can live in the house I already own, and they take everything else. She cleared her throat. It's a generous offer, considering the circumstances. I didn't answer. I simply closed the door. The knock came again, once, softer. I ignored it. She left after a few minutes. I stood behind the curtain and watched her walk to her car. She didn't look back. I called Tilson and told him everything. He laughed, not cruelly, just in that short, exasperated way that lawyers do when someone thinks a threat is a gift. She knows the recording will hold, he said. She's hoping you don't have the stomach for a fight. I've had a stomach for worse, I said. That night, I lit a fire in the fireplace, even though it wasn't cold enough, just to hear the crackling, to remind myself that warmth can be chosen, built. I pulled out a photo album, one of the older ones, still bound in that faux leather Harold hated, and flipped to a picture of Savannah at 17. She was standing in the driveway, holding up her acceptance letter to Northwestern. I'd made her a pie that day, apple, her favorite. She barely acknowledged it. On the back of the photo, in Harold's writing, "First step, let her walk it." I stared at that line for a long time. The phone rang around 10. Unknown number. I answered. A young man's voice. Hesitant. "Grandma?" It took me a second. "Matthew?" "Yeah, it's me." Savannah's youngest. He never called. Not for birthdays, not for holidays, not even when Harold died. "I heard what's going on. From Mom. She's kind of losing it." I didn't speak. "She said you were trying to take everything away, that you're being manipulated. Do you believe that?" I don't know. But I don't think you're crazy. And I don't think you'd do something like this without a reason." That was more honesty than I'd heard from anyone in that house in a decade. "I appreciate you calling," I said. "I just wanted to say, if you need help. With anything. I'm not on Mom's side. I'm not on anyone's side. I just want things to calm down. Then stay out of the crossfire, Matthew, and finish college." "Okay," he said. "Love you, Grandma." I didn't say it back. Not yet. But I didn't hang up either. Sometimes silence is not absence. Sometimes it's just waiting. The next day was reserved for paperwork. Serious paperwork. The kind Harold used to spread out across the dining room table, muttering to himself and chewing the end of a pencil. I didn't chew pencils. I just underlined with a red pen. At 9 sharp, Tilson sent a paralegal to the house, a quiet young woman named Renee, with a large folder, a laptop, and a kind face that didn't try too hard. She sat at my kitchen table without making small talk, for which I was grateful. "We'll start with the house," she said, opening the file. "Title's clean, full ownership under your name since 1992. We're drafting a clause to prevent any transfer or contest without your direct and notarized consent." I nodded. "I'd like to add a provision. If I become medically incapacitated, the property goes into a trust, not to Savannah, to my granddaughter Claire." "Claire Crawford?" "Yes, my son's daughter. She's the only one who visits without asking for something." Renee nodded and made a note. "We'll need her full legal name and address, and your physician's name for the incapacity clause." I gave her both. Next came the shares. Harold's company had once been a small orthopedic equipment distributor. By the time he passed, Crawford Medical was handling contracts with 3 regional hospitals and 24 clinics across the state. He'd put most of it in my name during the cancer treatments, just in case, he said. Savannah had always assumed it would fall into her lap. "It's a privately held S-corp," Renee confirmed. "Majority stake under your name. We recommend drafting a succession plan with full restriction on sale or transfer without board approval." "And I'd like to assign my voting shares to a proxy," I said. She looked up. "My accountant. Harold trusted him. So do I. His name is Mark Welby." "Understood. That would protect your interest and block any hostile moves from the family." It felt strange hearing that word, hostile, in reference to my daughter. But it was accurate. That's what threats were. That's what coercion was. Even if it came from someone you once swaddled in hospital flannel. We moved on to the accounts. I had 3 main ones: personal checking, retirement savings, and the investment account Harold had opened in the late 80s, after reading a book about compound interest. That account had grown quietly, patiently. Savannah didn't even know it existed. "I want to lock that one," I said. "Make it untouchable." Renee smiled slightly. "There are legal instruments for that. We can create a living trust, irrevocable, naming Claire as the sole beneficiary. You remain trustee until incapacity or death. No one else can access it." "That's the one," I said. She printed the first draft while I made tea. My hands weren't shaking, but they were tired. Signing things, reviewing clauses, answering small but important questions. It was work, not dramatic, just long overdue. "You're very clear about what you want," Renee said gently, flipping to the next form. "Took me long enough." "No, ma'am. Most people never get there." We worked through the morning. By noon, my kitchen table looked like a war room. Legal pads, printouts, 3 pens, and a neat stack of signed documents. Renee scanned each one, cataloged them on her laptop, and made a checklist of next steps. "Your estate," she said last, "still names Savannah as executor. I want that changed. We'll prepare an amendment. Do you have someone in mind?" I thought a moment. Then, "Claire. She's young, but she listens. Then we'll make her executor, with a co-trustee until she's 30. Make it Welby. He's got more spine than I do." Renee smiled again. She packed the documents and stood. "You've done more today than most people manage in a year." I didn't respond. Just saw her out, watched her drive away, and then sat down at the table again. I stared at the now empty surface. Harold's place across from mine was still perfectly set. The placemat faded, the chair back worn smooth by decades of elbows and coffee. He'd always been the strategist, but I had been the one who stayed, who held things when they cracked. And now I was doing it again. Not for Savannah, not for legacy, for dignity. At 3:45, I got a call from Tilson. "We've received an official notice from Carr's office," he said. "They're petitioning the court for a review of your mental capacity." "As expected." "Yes. But here's what they didn't expect." I heard the smile in his voice. "We've already preemptively filed your updated estate documents and placed your assets under trust protection. The judge can't freeze assets that are legally shielded." They wanted to corner me. And they failed. There was a pause. "Would you consider a public statement?" he asked. "No press. Just something for the court file. A signed, dated note about your intentions." I thought for a moment, then stood, walked to the living room, and pulled down the photo of me and Claire from the mantel. She was 8 in that picture, holding a handful of flowers she'd picked from my yard. "I'll write something tonight," I said. "I want it to be my words, not legal words. Mine. I'll expect it tomorrow." "And Mrs. Crawford?" "Yes. I've worked with many clients, but this, what you're doing, it matters, even if no one else sees it yet." "I see it," I said quietly, "and that's finally enough." I heard her before I saw her. The familiar light knock, 2 quick taps and one softer, followed by the sound of the storm door creaking open. I didn't get up right away, just sat with the pen still in my hand, the page half written in front of me. "Grandma?" Her voice came gently through the hallway. "It's me," I called out. "In the kitchen, sweetheart." Claire stepped in with a small grocery bag in her arms and a wind-flushed face. Her coat was too thin for the weather, as usual, but she never seemed to notice. She had her father's jaw, but Harold's eyes. Gray, intelligent, a little too observant for her own good. "I brought milk and eggs, and that cinnamon bread you like from the Polish bakery. You spoil me, I said. Not nearly enough, she smiled, setting the bag down. We didn't hug right away. Claire had never been a big hugger, not since she was a teenager. She poured 2 cups of tea without asking, just the way I liked mine. Weak, no sugar, lemon slice on the rim. How's school? I asked. She was in her final year of nursing school, worked nights at a clinic, weekends at the student lab, and still managed to stop by at least once a week. She was always in motion, but never too rushed to sit. Tiring, fulfilling, overwhelming, same as usual. She sipped the tea, then tilted her head. You look sharper than usual. I've been busy. I heard. She said it carefully, no judgment, just space. I looked down at the page in front of me, the statement I was drafting for Tilson. Just a few paragraphs, nothing dramatic. But it mattered. Mom's spiraling, Claire said after a while. I didn't ask how she knew. Claire always knew things. She watched, she listened. Unlike her mother, who bulldozed through life assuming everyone would bend out of her way. She called me yesterday, said you'd been manipulated, that someone had gotten into your head. I raised an eyebrow. She meant me, Claire said plainly. She didn't say it, but she didn't have to. Did you answer her? I said I'd seen you make harder choices than this and never once fall apart. That made me smile. Claire leaned back in the chair, warming her hands on the mug. What she doesn't get is that I'm not doing anything to you. I'm just here, watching you do what should have been done years ago. She thinks I'm weak. She needs you to be weak. It's easier than admitting she pushed too far. We sat in silence for a while. Outside, the wind knocked against the windows, but inside it was warm, still, full of the soft ticking of the old kitchen clock. Why now? Claire asked gently. After all these years. I turned the pen slowly between my fingers. I think I reached a kind of quiet, a stillness I hadn't let myself feel before. And in that quiet, I heard myself clearly. And I was tired of being afraid. Claire nodded like she understood. Good. That's enough. She reached into her coat and pulled out a small envelope. What's this? I asked. My updated contact info. Cell, email, work shift schedule, just in case. I held the envelope for a moment before placing it in the top drawer of the buffet, right next to the emergency cash and Harold's old Swiss Army knife. Your father's furious, I said. He's always been better at fury than listening. You're not afraid to stand between us? She gave me a look. You're the one standing. I'm just not getting out of the way. I nodded, feeling the weight of that. As she stood to leave, I walked her to the door. She paused with her hand on the knob. If it comes to court, she said softly, I'll testify. I'll say everything I know, everything I've seen. I don't want to put you in the middle. I'm already there, and I'd rather be in the middle than in the dark. She opened the door and stepped into the wind. I watched her walk down the path, coat flapping behind her like a sail. She didn't turn back. At the table, her teacup still steamed faintly. I picked up the pen and turned back to the page. This time, the words came easily. To whom it may concern, I, Marilyn June Crawford, write this without pressure, persuasion, or confusion. I am of sound mind and memory. I have chosen, of my own will, to protect my assets, home, and remaining years from further exploitation or emotional manipulation. This is not an act of retaliation. It is a decision made in dignity. I owe no explanations for protecting the life I've built. But I offer this one freely, because I am still here, because I remember who I am, Because it's time. MJ Crawford. She arrived without warning. No call, no knock. Just the sound of tires crunching over the gravel and the car door slamming harder than necessary. I saw her through the living room window, walking up the path in her camel coat and high-heeled boots, carrying a flat paper bag from the upscale bakery downtown. I didn't move, just watched. Then the bell rang. 3 times. Impatient already. I opened the door just wide enough to block her view of the hallway. "Mother," she said too brightly, "I brought cherry tarts. Your favorite." "They were never my favorite." "Well, that's what you told Aunt May at your 60th. She smiled, as if we were simply reminiscing, as if nothing had happened. "I was being polite." Savannah shifted, her smile thinning. "May I come in?" "I don't think that's a good idea." She held up the bag. "At least take these." I took the bag without thanks and set it on the hallway table without looking inside. She stood there, awkward now, eyes darting behind me like she expected Claire or someone from Tilson's office to appear. "I wanted to talk," she said finally, dropping the pretense. "I gathered." She lowered her voice, a subtle shift. "This has gone far enough, don't you think?" "Far enough for whom?" "For all of us. This tension, this embarrassment. You've made your point." "That wasn't the point." "Fine," she said, biting off the word. "So what now? You want to cut your daughter out of your life? Your only child? You did that yourself, Savannah. One hallway conversation at a time." Her eyes darkened. "You're making a mistake. You think Claire's going to take care of you? She's a student. She's barely present. She's more present than you've ever been. I sent flowers when Dad died." "No," I said. "Jeremy sent them. The card was typed. You didn't even call." She looked away, face stiffening. "I was grieving too," she said. "Grief isn't a competition, but you used mine as a moment to claim something you hadn't earned." Savannah took a breath, tried to soften her voice again. "Look, this doesn't have to be ugly. I'm just asking you to reconsider. We can go back. You rescind the trust paperwork. Bring the estate back under family management. I'll make sure you're looked after. Comfortably. Like a patient," I said. "Or an elderly tenant." She didn't deny it. "It's not about punishment," I added. "It's about memory. Mine. And the part of it that knows exactly how we got here." Savannah reached into her purse and pulled out a folded paper. "This is a proposal, an alternative. Jeremy had it drawn up. I think if you just read, 'I won't,'" I said. "You haven't even looked at it." "I don't need to. Because I know what it is. A cleaner version of the same threat you made in that hallway." She stepped back slightly, as if slapped. "You can't seriously want to fight this out in court." "I don't want to fight," I said, simply. "I just want to stop losing." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "You're not well." Ah, there it was. "You're isolating. You're letting people into your head. Lawyers, Claire, outsiders. This isn't you. It's exactly me. You just never bothered to ask who that was." Her voice dropped again. "You've always needed help, Mother. You've never been great with numbers. You forget things. You—" "Finish that sentence, and I'll call my attorney right now." She stopped. The wind picked up outside, rustling the porch leaves between us. "I'm leaving now," she said coldly. "But I'm warning you, if this goes to court, everything becomes public. Everything. You'll regret it." I nodded once. "You've said that before." She turned, her heels sharp against the wood. Halfway to the car, she paused, then turned back just slightly. "I hope you're ready for the mess you've made." "I've been cleaning up yours for 40 years," I said quietly. I think I can manage one of my own. She didn't respond. Just got into the car and drove off. The wind followed her, but it left something behind. An emptiness, yes, but a calm one. I stood there a moment longer, then closed the door, locked it, and picked up the bag of tarts from the table. I didn't even open it, just carried it straight to the bin. The cafe was half full when I arrived, a quiet hum of teaspoons and soft chatter rising against the scent of fresh muffins and burnt espresso. I didn't come here often, but today I needed something other than silence. Something other than legal language and memories in paper form. Lorraine was already there, seated near the back by the window, waving with her usual discreet urgency. Next to her sat Mabel, the former school librarian with sharp eyes, and Dot, who ran the secondhand shop by the post office. Women I'd known for decades, women who'd buried husbands and paid mortgages and raised children who didn't call anymore. They made space without ceremony as I joined them. "Coffee's terrible," Lorraine said, "but the lemon squares are decent." "Fair warning," Mabel added. "Dot's already had two." Dot shrugged. "It's my cheat day." Again. We laughed softly, the way older women do, without giggles, without guilt. Just sound passed between people who've survived more than they've ever explained. "So?" Lorraine leaned in, eyes glinting. "We've heard whispers. Your daughter's lawyer's been asking around town like she's digging for dirt. Says you've been confused lately." I stirred my tea slowly. "She says I've lost capacity." Dot snorted. "You mean like lost patience?" "I made a decision she didn't like," I said. "Now she's calling it mental decline." Mabel's voice was calm. "They always do, when they can't control us anymore. The moment you stop nodding, they start diagnosing." I nodded. "She says I've been manipulated." "Who?" Lorraine asked. "The lawyers? Your granddaughter?" I shook my head. By myself. I've finally started listening to the part of me that's been screaming in silence for years. That quieted them, in a good way. I took a sip of tea. "For decades, I excused things," I continued. "The rudeness, the coldness, the way she'd only visit when she needed something notarized or paid off. I told myself she was busy, stressed. I thought if I stayed available, she'd remember I mattered." "You're not the only one," Dot said. "My son asked for money last year to help with rent. Next thing I knew, he posted pictures from Greece." "Mine's got me paying her cat's vet insurance," Lorraine muttered. "A Persian. Fancier food than I eat." Mabel smiled grimly. "And if you say no once, they treat you like a stranger with a closed wallet." "I finally said no," I told them. "And now I'm dangerous." "Good," Lorraine said. "Be dangerous." We sat for a while like that, trading stories, not complaints, not gossip, just real things, quiet griefs that had been waiting for witnesses. No one tried to outdo anyone. No one interrupted. It was the most honest table I'd sat at in years. "Claire's still with you?" Mabel asked. I nodded. "She's steady, and she sees." "She's worth everything then," Dot said. "You plant a tree in rough soil, and sometimes it still gives fruit." When we stood to leave, Lorraine touched my wrist. "If it gets ugly, you call me," she said. "I'll testify if they come after you. I've seen Savannah in town. I know how she talks about you. And I know what she wants." "She'll deny it all," I said. "So let her," Lorraine replied. "But not alone." I left the cafe lighter, not because anything had changed, but because I wasn't the only one who had carried this kind of weight. And maybe that's how women like us survive. Not by shouting, not by waiting for apologies, but by finally sitting at tables where the truth can breathe They scheduled the preliminary hearing for a Monday morning, as if the courthouse wanted to make it feel routine. The kind of thing people could stop by on their way to the bank. Nothing urgent, nothing dramatic. Just a calendar box with a case number and a bench. But it wasn't routine for me. I wore my navy suit, the same one I wore to Harold's memorial. Pressed, quiet, respectful. Claire offered to come with me, but I told her no. Not yet. Not for this part. She deserved to see the results, not the performance. Tilson met me outside the courthouse steps. He was holding a leather briefcase and a clipboard, and he looked tired in the way lawyers do when the opposing side thinks it's going to win on narrative alone. "She's already inside," he said, "with her counsel." "Did she bring Jeremy?" "Yes, and a paralegal who looks about 15. I smiled. That'll help their case. They're going to push for a wellness assessment. Their angle is that you've been influenced by others, specifically Claire, and that your sudden financial changes point to diminished judgment. And the tape? Admissible. We're not playing it yet. But they know it exists. And that's enough. For now." He offered me his arm. I didn't take it. I walked beside him. The hearing room was smaller than I'd imagined, more like a conference space than a courtroom. There were no pews, no bailiff, just a long table, a bench, and a judge with reading glasses low on her nose. Savannah didn't look at me when I entered. She was whispering something to Daniela Carr, who looked unbothered. Jeremy sat stiffly behind them, arms crossed, watching me like I was late to a lecture. I sat down, opened my folder slowly, and took out the statement I'd written. Tilson laid his papers out in perfect rows. I glanced once at Savannah. Her mouth was drawn tight. Not angry, calculating. The judge cleared her throat. "We're here on a request for protective review regarding the estate management and legal decision-making capacity of Mrs. Marilyn June Crawford. Petition filed by Savannah Clay, daughter of the respondent." That word, respondent, clung to me for a moment. Ms. Carr stood. "Your Honor, our concern is simple. Mrs. Crawford, while of advanced age, has recently made abrupt, large-scale changes to her estate. These include establishing restrictive trusts, altering beneficiaries, and appointing a young and inexperienced family member as executor. We believe she has been unduly influenced and may not fully understand the implications of these decisions." The judge turned to Tilson. "Mr. Tilson, your response." He stood with no notes in his hand. "Your Honor, we have multiple pieces of documentation demonstrating Mrs. Crawford's full understanding of her legal rights, estate structure, and the decisions she's made. We also have a written statement from Mrs. Crawford herself, expressing her intentions without ambiguity." The judge looked at me. "Mrs. Crawford, are you comfortable speaking for yourself this morning?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Then please." I stood, slowly but without hesitation. The room quieted. "I'm not confused," I said clearly. "I'm not unstable. I'm not manipulated. I'm 78 years old and entirely capable of making decisions about the life I built with my husband." I held the judge's gaze. I didn't glance at Savannah. I didn't need to. I changed my estate not out of impulse, but after many years of giving without return. I have no intention of harming anyone. But I also have no intention of letting what I earned be taken through pressure, entitlement, or threat. The judge gave a small nod. "Thank you, Mrs. Crawford." Savannah shifted in her chair. Daniela leaned over and whispered something that made Savannah's mouth press into a line. The judge spoke again. "This isn't a competency trial, Ms. Carr. At this stage, unless your side presents a formal affidavit From a licensed professional stating concern for the respondent's capacity, I see no grounds to proceed further today. Ms. Carr opened her mouth, then closed it. Furthermore, the judge continued, if this matter escalates, the court will consider all materials provided by both parties, including the private audio recording your client has acknowledged exists. A pause. Mrs. Crawford, you're free to go. No further action is required at this time. I nodded. Thank you, Your Honor. As I gathered my papers, Savannah rose suddenly. Mother, she said. I turned, slowly. I just want to talk, without lawyers. I studied her face. Her voice was softer now, almost cautious, but I could still see the tension in her jaw, the calculation in her eyes. Not today, I said. Maybe not ever. Then I left the room without another word. Outside, Tilson held the door as I stepped into the sunlight. You did more than fine, he said. I wasn't trying to win, I said. I was just trying to be seen. The clinic was quiet when I arrived. Clean, colorless, efficient. The kind of place where nothing smelled like fear, but everything felt like evaluation. I checked in at the desk, handed over my ID and insurance card, and waited beneath a painting of sailboats I didn't care for. This wasn't court-mandated. Tilson hadn't pushed for it. No judge required it. But I wanted it. I wanted a third party, a neutral room, a stranger in a white coat to look me in the eye and say, "You're still here. You're still thinking clearly. You still count." The nurse who called my name looked no older than Claire. She smiled too much, but not unkindly. Marilyn Crawford? Yes. We'll begin with a full cognitive screen, followed by an emotional health assessment. Dr. Mehta will meet you at the end to go over results. I followed her down a long hallway and into a small room with pale walls and 2 chairs. A notebook sat on the table between them. No machines, no needles, just a pen and paper and time. The first half was simple: shapes, memory, repeating sequences, identifying images, recalling stories. I did them all without hesitation. Do you feel anxious on most days? The nurse asked at one point. No, I said. Only when I'm being watched unfairly. Do you ever feel disoriented at home? No, I feel most like myself there. She nodded, marked something down. Her hands moved quickly, her voice never rising. At one point, she smiled again. You're doing very well. I'm not here to pass, I said. I'm here to put it in writing. She didn't respond, just kept checking boxes. When Dr. Mehta finally entered, she was calm, older, and didn't smile at all. I liked her immediately. I've reviewed your test results, she said, and I'd like to speak briefly, not as a doctor diagnosing a problem, but as a woman recognizing another woman who's been questioned one too many times. That made me look up. She continued, There's nothing here to suggest any impairment. Your cognitive scores are well above average for your age. Your memory is sharp. Your decision-making patterns are rational and internally consistent. I nodded. Good. There is some elevated stress, understandably. Yes. May I ask what prompted this request? I could have told her everything. The will, the recording, the hallway. But instead, I said, I got tired of being told I don't know my own mind. She leaned forward, hands folded. You're not alone in that. I believed her. She handed me a copy of the report, signed, dated, stamped. This will hold up in any court, she said. But more importantly, it'll hold up when you read it alone, at night, when the doubt creeps in. I folded the paper carefully and placed it in my purse. As I stood to leave, she added, If more women did what you just did, not out of fear, but out of defiance, we'd see a lot fewer guardianships and a lot more respect. I didn't cry, but I felt something shift in my spine, a kind of quiet unbending. Claire picked me up outside. She didn't ask questions, just opened the door and said, "You okay?" "Yes." "Was it hard?" "No." It was just honest. She drove us home without music. We didn't need it. At the house, I made tea and placed the report beside the updated will and the bank documents. I didn't reread them. I didn't have to. The phone rang once that evening. Savannah. I let it ring. The second time, she left a voicemail. Her voice sounded more tired than angry. "Mother, I don't know what's happening to you. You're not the same. We used to be on the same side." I didn't reply. Because we were never on the same side. Not really. I'd just spent decades pretending the edge of her knife was love. Now there was paper, and proof, and silence. And it was all mine. I wrote the letter on a Thursday. It wasn't part of any legal plan. Tilson didn't ask for it. Claire didn't suggest it. I didn't owe it to anyone. But something inside me needed it written. Not for evidence, not for leverage. Just so the words would stop repeating themselves in my head at night, like an old song I didn't even like. I used the good stationery, the thick ivory paper with a faint linen grain that Harold had once bought in bulk from a closing office supply store. "Just in case we ever have something worth saying," he joked. He'd used it for exactly 2 letters. One to the VA, one to me. I sat at the kitchen table, just like I had during tax season, flu seasons, and the long months of his chemo, when we used this table for everything but eating. And then I began. "Savannah, I'm not writing this to change your mind. I know you've made it up, and I suspect nothing I say will unsettle it. That's fine. We've both made choices. This is just mine, on paper. You say I've been distant, secretive, manipulated. But Savannah, I've spent most of my life giving. Quietly, without keeping score. I gave you space when you slammed doors. I gave you silence when your words turned sharp. I gave you money when you called it help and guilt when you called it love. I gave you pieces of myself because I thought if I stayed soft enough, long enough, you'd come back to me as someone who saw me as a person. Not a wall, not a purse, not a witness. But I've learned something too late. People who take without pausing will never notice what they've taken. Not until the hand goes still. This hand, Savannah, is still. You threatened me. I don't need to argue it. I recorded it. I listened to it again this morning. Not because I needed proof, but because I wanted to remember how calm I sounded. That calm wasn't fear. It was the start of freedom. I know you're angry, but I don't think you're surprised. Somewhere in you, you must have known this day would come. When the patience ran out. When the silence dried up. When the mother you counted on to never push back did. You've said I'm hurting the family, but family isn't something you inherit. It's something you maintain, and you let ours fall into disrepair long before I picked up a pen. I don't hate you. I'm not even angry now. I'm tired. And with that tiredness comes clarity. I'm not doing this out of spite. I'm doing it because I've finally stopped waiting for someone else to treat my life like it matters. I hope someday you understand that. But I won't be waiting for that either. Mother. I folded the letter once, placed it in an envelope, wrote her name on the front in cursive I hadn't used in years. No address. She would get it eventually. Tilson's office would see to that. Then I stood, walked to the fireplace, and set a match to one of the drafts I'd scribbled earlier in frustration. Watched it curl and blacken in the grate. Let it go. By the time Claire stopped by that evening, the kitchen was quiet again. She saw the sealed envelope on the mantel and didn't ask. Just poured tea and said, "You look settled." "I am. I like it on you." She didn't know how much that meant. How many years I'd spent trying not to seem like a burden. How often I dimmed myself just to keep the room calm. Now there was a letter. A will. A wall between me and the old habit of waiting to be forgiven for existing. And in its place, finally, peace. I didn't leave the house that day. Not out of fear. Not because of lawyers or letters or threats left hanging in voicemail. Just because I didn't need to be anywhere else. That, in itself, was a kind of revelation. The morning was slow. I folded towels, opened windows, let air into rooms that had grown too used to silence. The maple tree outside the bedroom had begun to shed, golden leaves collecting at the base like loose memory. I made a note to ask Claire if she wanted to help rake this weekend. No rush. For lunch, I had soup. Just soup. No second plate, no extra portion saved in case someone stops by. No one did. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a loss. Just a fact. Afterward, I went to the bedroom closet. The top shelf still held boxes I hadn't touched since Harold's last year. I took them down one by one. Old tax folders, photo envelopes, warranties for appliances we no longer owned. I threw most of it out. But one box I kept. It was labeled in Harold's hand. Letters, not business. Inside were cards from our early days, scribbled notes from road trips, a single birthday card he'd drawn himself during a year we couldn't afford much else. And a small sheet of paper, folded 4 times, yellowed around the edges. His handwriting was clear. If you're reading this without me, I hope you remember 2 things. You were never just the quiet one. You were the engine. And whatever they try to take from you, don't give them your name. I hadn't seen that note in 15 years. I sat on the edge of the bed with it in my lap and let the words settle. Not stir me. Not undo me. Just settle. He knew. Even then. He knew who I was and what I might forget to protect. I didn't cry. There was no need. Instead, I folded it back carefully and placed it in the drawer beside the medical report. Not to file it away, to keep it close. The doorbell didn't ring that day. The phone didn't buzz. No letters came demanding apologies. No new threats from Savannah's counsel. Maybe they were regrouping. Maybe they were waiting. But I wasn't. I baked in the afternoon, something simple, something mine. The kitchen smelled like apples and cinnamon, and I opened the back door to let it drift out into the yard. Across the fence, a neighbor waved. I waved back. At 4, I sat in the armchair Harold used to claim as his, the one near the fireplace with the flattened armrest and the lamp that only works if you jiggle the cord. I pulled a book from the shelf, not a legal brief, not a how-to, not a pamphlet on estate rights, just a novel. A story with no paperwork attached. For the first time in weeks, I read 10 pages without rereading a line. At sunset, I took the last slice of pie out to the porch and watched the light shift. The maple was almost bare now, its branches like bones, its trunk steady. It didn't look sad. It looked unburdened. I sat there until the sky went quiet, until the streetlights flickered on, until the pie was gone and the plate was cold in my hand. Then I stood, went inside, and turned off every light in the house by choice. Not to hide. To rest. I started writing the letter to Claire just after sunrise. I couldn't sleep. Not out of dread. Not even nerves. I simply had too much still in me that hadn't been said aloud, and it deserved to be written before the courtroom made everything loud again. This letter wasn't for the judge, not for records or files or evidence folders. This was for her. I used the same paper I'd used for Savannah's letter, though this time I didn't write her name across the front until I'd folded every page and sealed the envelope. I needed the words to be whole before I handed them over. Claire, I've been called many things in my life. Wife, mother, widow, sometimes even dear, often too quiet, rarely strong, never dangerous. But lately, they're calling me all sorts of things. Incompetent, confused, manipulated. They say I'm not myself. But the truth, Claire, is this. I have never been more myself than I am right now. And part of that is because of you. I don't know what I expected when I finally stood up and said no. Maybe silence. Maybe war. But I didn't expect you. You didn't swoop in to save me. You didn't try to fix things. You just sat beside me, poured tea, and let me be clear. Let me be steady. Let me be seen. Do you know how rare that is? To be seen, not managed? You're young, but your eyes carry something older. Something I recognize. You don't ask questions to catch people. You ask to understand. And when I gave you pieces of myself, you didn't pocket them. You held them up to the light and made room for more. That's why I've named you. Not just as beneficiary, not just as executor, but as someone who will remember, not the numbers or the property or the papers, but me. The way I stood, the way I finally stood. People will call what I did selfish, unnecessary, maybe even dramatic. Let them. You don't owe them a rebuttal. You don't owe me a defense. You just owe yourself the same thing I owed myself. Clarity. There may be more storms. Tomorrow may not be easy. Savannah may say cruel things. Others may follow. But truth, once spoken, does not shrink just because it is challenged. You are not responsible for the wreckage that other people cause by demanding silence from the women they underestimate. You are not responsible for soothing everyone else's discomfort when someone finally tells the truth. All I ask is that you keep your eyes open, stay steady, and remember that softness is not weakness, not when it comes from a place of choice. You are my peace in all this, Claire. But more than that, you are proof. Proof that something in this line, this family, has bent toward courage. And if the day ever comes when you feel doubt pressing in or voices rising too loudly in your life, come sit at this table, read this letter, and remember, it's never too late to stop disappearing. With love, M. I signed it quietly. No grandma, no mom's mom, just M. She would understand. I placed the envelope in the drawer next to the revised estate binder. If something happened, if I didn't get to say all I wanted in court, she would have this. She would know. Then I brewed coffee. Went through the checklist with Tilson on the phone. The witnesses were lined up. The recordings archived. The documents signed, sealed, filed. My mind was calm. Late in the afternoon, I walked the length of the house, touched each doorknob, each light switch. Not like saying goodbye, more like reminding the space that I was still here, that I'd stayed through every season of its quiet weather. I sat in Harold's chair again, not to cry, just to breathe. Tomorrow, they would listen. Maybe even believe me. Maybe not. But the truth would be spoken. And that was already enough. The courtroom was colder than I remembered. Not the space, just the feeling. That particular kind of cold that comes when too many people are watching, waiting, hoping you'll stumble so they can say they were right to doubt you. But I didn't stumble. I walked in alone, carrying only my bag and the folder Tilson had organized for me. Claire was already seated near the back, not in the row behind the lawyers, but 2 rows further. Quiet support, not spotlight. Savannah was there, of course, dressed too sharply, her jaw tight. Jeremy beside her, reading something on his phone with the detached focus of a man who wants this done and buried. The judge called the session to order. No one stood except the lawyers. Carr opened again with the same lines as last time. Concern, unpredictability, potential confusion, the need for court supervision. She used phrases like long-standing emotional fragility and vulnerability to suggestion. Her voice was calm, but it was made of ice. Tilson stood and responded in the same quiet tone he always used. He didn't attack. He simply placed facts where everyone could see them. He submitted the letter I'd written, the one I read aloud last week. He submitted the medical report, the legal filings, the audio transcript. He named names, dates, financials. Then he sat down. The judge turned to me. "Mrs. Crawford, do you wish to speak?" I stood, hands folded in front of me, not trembling. "I don't have much to add," I said. "You've heard the facts. You've read the evaluations. You've seen the papers I signed. The choices I made were deliberate, not cruel, not confused, just final." I glanced once at Savannah. She looked away. "I didn't come here to win," I added, "only to be left in peace." The judge nodded slowly, then turned to Carr. "Unless new evidence is presented today, the court is prepared to rule." Carr opened her mouth, but said nothing. The judge continued. "The petition to remove estate control from Mrs. Marilyn Crawford is denied. The court finds no grounds for incapacity, nor evidence of undue influence." I heard Claire exhale behind me. I didn't turn. The judge added more softly, "I also want to say this. It is not uncommon for families to disagree. But disagreement is not dysfunction, and independence is not confusion." With that, the gavel came down. Just once. Quiet. Final. Savannah stood immediately. Jeremy didn't look at me. Neither did she. They walked out without a word. I remained a moment longer, not out of hesitation, just stillness. Then I turned to Claire. She was already standing, coat folded over her arm, eyes calm. "Lunch?" she said. I nodded. We walked out together. There was no music playing, no news cameras, no applause. Just 2 women leaving a cold room behind, and one of them carrying her name intact. The days that followed were strangely simple. No more calls from lawyers, no more documents arriving in thick envelopes, no more whispers from neighbors trying to decide which version of the story to believe. The story was over, or at least that version of it. And I was still here. I spent the first morning after court doing laundry, not as therapy, not as metaphor, just because it needed to be done. I folded sheets and thought about nothing in particular, and it felt like breathing. Claire stopped by that afternoon. She didn't bring questions, just a small bag of groceries and a new novel she thought I might like. We sat on the porch for a while. "You feel different," she said finally. "I feel quiet," I answered. She smiled. "That's new." We didn't talk about Savannah. There was nothing left to say. She hadn't reached out, and I hadn't gone looking. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the pull of that old rope. Obligation dressed up as love, guilt disguised as loyalty. She had her story. I had mine. And I no longer needed her to believe mine for it to be true. One evening, I went through the attic, found the old sewing machine I hadn't touched since Harold passed. I set it up on the dining room table and let the weight of its hum fill the house as I mended a torn curtain I'd ignored for years. That night, I slept with the window cracked open. The air was cold, but not unkind. Each day was like that, uneventful, but mine. And that was more than enough. 1 week later, Claire and I visited the cemetery. We brought Harold's favorite pipe tobacco and left it tucked behind the stone. She laughed when I told her it was his way of getting rid of visitors who lingered too long. He'd light up, even when he wasn't smoking, just to make them go. He was subtle like that, I said. You are too, she replied, but not quiet anymore. I thought about that the whole way home. She was right. I'd mistaken silence for strength for too many years. But silence had cost me my voice, my name, my right to say enough. I wasn't loud now. I never would be. But I was clear. And clarity, it turns out, carries farther than noise. One night, long after she'd gone, I took out a clean page of that good paper and wrote a single sentence across the top. I am not sorry for learning late what I should have always known. Then I folded it, not for anyone else, but for myself. I tucked it inside the back of the estate binder, a kind of signature, a kind of proof. Because that's what this story had been all along. Not revenge, not performance. Just proof that a woman could reclaim her life, even if she started at 78. If you're still reading this, maybe you're like me. Maybe you've given too much, too quietly, for too long. Maybe you've told yourself that the time for change has passed. That if you didn't speak up 20 years ago, you've forfeited the right to speak at all. You haven't. It is never too late to tell the truth, especially to yourself. Not for court, not for proof, just for peace. If this story meant something to you, if it felt like someone finally said out loud what you've carried in silence, then share it. With a friend, with a daughter, with your own quiet voice. And if you're ready, tell your own story. We're listening.